What if she was already dead? Yes, you heard me right. Not metaphorically, not poetically, not philosophically. Literally. Think about it. What if the woman sitting in that chair, with that unsettling expression, with that stillness nobody has ever been able to fully explain, was not alive when Leonardo painted her? What if the most famous smile in human history belonged to a corpse? This is not a rumor. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a forensic, historical, and scientific case built slowly and carefully over decades by researchers who studied this painting with technologies Leonardo could never have imagined would one day exist, like infrared cameras. And the more they looked, the more they kept finding something the naked eye had been walking past for 500 years. Leonardo spent more than 4 years working on this painting. He carried it with him everywhere he went. He never delivered it. He never let it go. A man who painted dozens of works in his lifetime kept coming back to this one canvas, adding layer upon layer of paint so thin that science still cannot fully replicate it. And when researchers finally looked underneath those layers, when their cameras penetrated a surface that human eyes had only ever seen from the outside, what they found changed everything. This is not the story everybody already knows. This is a completely new perspective, discovered by researchers, hidden inside the most famous painting in the world. The year is 1503, Florence, Italy. Leonardo da Vinci is 51 years old. He is already one of the most celebrated minds in Europe, not just as a painter, but as a scientist, an anatomist, an engineer, an inventor. A man whose private notebooks contain ideas that the world will not catch up to for centuries. He is a man who studies the flight of birds and the flow of water with the same obsessive precision he brings to a human face. A man who cannot look at anything without wanting to understand it completely. He receives a commission from a Florentine merchant named Francesco del Giocondo. The request is simple: a portrait of his wife. A woman named Lisa Gherardini, 24 years old, recently delivered of their second child. It is the kind of commission Leonardo accepted regularly, a portrait, a face, a record of a person for their family, and yet he never delivered it. He worked on it for 4 years in Florence, then he left Florence and took it with him. He carried it through Milan, through Rome, eventually all the way to France, where he spent the last years of his life as a guest of King Francis I. When he died in 1519, the painting was still in his possession, still undelivered, still, apparently, unfinished. A man who accepted a simple commission for a merchant's wife and spent the last 16 years of his life unable to let it go. That alone should tell us that something about this painting was never simple. Before we talk about what is hidden, we need to understand what is visible, so look at it carefully. The first thing that strikes any trained eye is the background. Behind the figure of the woman, stretching out on both sides, is a landscape. Mountains, water, a winding path, a bridge. It is painted with a hazy, atmospheric quality that feels almost dreamlike, almost not quite real. That is deliberate, and it is strange. If you look carefully at the landscape on the left side of the painting and the landscape on the right side, you will notice something that should not be possible. They do not match. The horizon line on the left sits higher than the horizon line on the right. The two sides of the background are painted as if they exist in different spatial realities, as if the world behind her is not one continuous landscape, but two separate ones, placed side by side. No accident of technique explains this. Leonardo was one of the most technically precise painters who ever lived. He understood perspective at a mathematical level that most of his contemporaries could not approach. If the horizon lines do not match, it is because he chose to make them not match. Why would he paint a background that is spatially impossible? Now look at the hands. They are folded in the lower portion of the canvas, one resting over the other, with a stillness and a weight that art historians have written about for centuries. The hands of the Mona Lisa are considered among the most perfectly rendered hands in the history of painting. The skin, the knuckle structure, the subtle suggestion of bone and tendon beneath the surface, they are painted with the precision of someone who has studied hands from the inside out, which Leonardo had. He dissected human bodies. He drew hands from cadavers. He understood the architecture of the human hand at an anatomical level that no other painter of his era could match. And yet, there is something about these hands that researchers began to notice when they looked closely enough. Something in the quality of the stillness. Something in the way the weight of them sits. Something that is very difficult to articulate, but impossible to ignore once you have seen it. And then, there is the smile. The smile of the Mona Lisa has been analyzed, debated, written about, and argued over for 5 centuries. It is the most discussed facial expression in human history. And what makes it so endlessly fascinating is not that it is beautiful, or mysterious, or ambiguous, though it is all of those things. What makes it extraordinary is that it is neurologically unique. When a living human being smiles, certain things happen involuntarily. The muscles around the eyes contract, the cheeks lift. There is a quality of movement implied in a genuine smile, a sense that the expression arrived from somewhere, that it is the result of something, that it belongs to a person who is present and responding to the world around them. The smile of the Mona Lisa does none of those things. It is perfectly, completely, unnervingly still. There is no implied movement in it, no sense of arrival. It sits on her face the way an expression sits on a face that is no longer capable of changing. And that stillness, that quality that every person who has ever stood in front of this painting has felt without being able to name, is exactly where the death theory begins. For most of its 500-year history, the Mona Lisa was studied the way all paintings were studied, with eyes, with expertise, with the accumulated knowledge of art historians who could read a brushstroke the way a musician reads a note. Then technology changed everything. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, researchers began applying scientific imaging tools to the world's most famous paintings. Tools that could see through layers of paint, through centuries of varnish, through the surface that human eyes had only ever been able to touch. What they found inside the Mona Lisa was not what anyone expected. Beneath the surface that the world has been looking at for 5 centuries, there are layers. Not just the normal layers of paint that any artist would apply in the process of building a composition, but layers of extraordinary thinness, applied with a technique so precise and so patient that modern painters using modern tools have been unable to fully replicate it. Leonardo called this technique sfumato, from the Italian word for smoke. The idea was to build up a surface through hundreds of layers of translucent glaze, each one so thin it was almost not there, until the result was an image with no visible brushstrokes, no hard edges, no lines, just a gradual, seamless transition from light to shadow that felt less like paint and more like atmosphere itself. The sfumato in the Mona Lisa is the most extreme application of this technique in Leonardo's entire body of work. Researchers have estimated that some areas of the painting contain up to 30 separate layers of glaze, each one applied and allowed to dry completely before the next was added. 30 layers, each one thinner than a human hair, for a merchant's portrait that he never delivered. But what the imaging revealed beneath those 30 layers was something far more unsettling than a technical achievement. There was another face underneath. Not a completely different composition, not a separate painting, but an earlier version of the same face, in a slightly different position, with subtle but significant differences in the expression. And in that earlier version, something about the face was different in a way that researchers struggled at first to articulate. The later version, the one the world knows, has that famous, ambiguous expression, that stillness, that impossible quality that 5 centuries of viewers have never been able to fully name. The earlier version, buried underneath, had something closer to a neutral expression, a face at rest, a face that was simply present, without the quality of mystery that Leonardo spent years building on top of it. He had painted a face, then spent years transforming it into something else entirely. The question is, what he was transforming it into, and why? In the years since scientific imaging opened the interior of the Mona Lisa to researchers, a theory has been building, slowly and carefully, in the academic literature. The theory is this: Lisa Gherardini, the merchant's wife who sat for the portrait in 1503, died sometime during the years Leonardo was working on it, and rather than setting the painting aside, rather than considering the commission complete or abandoned, Leonardo continued. He kept working, he kept returning to that face, he kept adding layers, refining the expression, building towards something. He was no longer painting a living woman, he was painting something else entirely. The evidence begins with the historical timeline. The commission was placed in 1503. Lisa Gherardini's death is documented, though the exact date has been a subject of historical debate. What is not debated is that Leonardo never delivered the painting. A portrait commissioned by a husband for his living wife, a straightforward, practical commission of the kind that painters accepted and delivered regularly, was never given to the man who ordered it. If she had been alive, the painting would have been delivered. The evidence continues with the expression itself. Forensic facial analysts who have studied the Mona Lisa, using the same techniques applied to crime scene photographs, have noted specific qualities in the musculature of the face that are consistent with post-mortem stillness. The absence of the involuntary muscular movements that characterize the expression of a living person. The particular quality of the skin surface, the specific way the weight of the features sits. These are not qualities that a living model would produce naturally. They are qualities that Leonardo, the man, who had spent years studying corpses, who understood the human face at an anatomical level no other painter of his era could approach, who knew exactly what death did to a face and how it differed from sleep or stillness or calm, would have known how to paint precisely and deliberately. And then there is the most unsettling detail of all, Leonardo's notebooks. The most extraordinary private document in the history of human thought, contain hundreds of pages of anatomical drawings, scientific observations, and private reflections. Among them are detailed studies of the human face at various stages, including death. He was a man who looked at death with the same calm, precise, scientific attention he brought to everything else. He did not look away from it, he studied it, he drew it. He understood it with an intimacy that most human beings spend their entire lives avoiding. And the expression he spent 16 years perfecting on that canvas, the expression that no living model has ever been able to reproduce, that no art historian has ever been able to fully describe, that 5 centuries of human beings have stood in front of and felt something inexplicable, is the expression of a face that has passed beyond the reach of any emotion. Not sad, not happy, not mysterious, still. The stillness of something that has finished. There is a version of this story that is simply tragic. A painter who received a commission for a portrait lost his subject before he could finish and spent the rest of his life unable to let go of her face, unable to deliver it to the husband who would never see his wife again anyway, unable to finish it because finishing it would mean accepting that she was gone. But I do not think that is the whole story. Leonardo was not a sentimental man, he was a scientist. A man who dissected corpses without flinching because he believed the truth about existence was written inside the body. A man who studied death the way other men studied scripture, not to mourn it, to understand it. I think he kept that painting because he was trying to answer a question, not who was Lisa Gherardini, but what remains of a person when the person is gone. What is left in a face after everything that made it living has departed? What the boundary between presence and absence actually looks like when you study it closely enough and paint it carefully enough and build it up layer by layer by layer until it becomes something that is neither fully one thing nor fully the other. The smile of the Mona Lisa is not mysterious because we do not know what she is thinking. It is mysterious because she is not thinking anything. And Leonardo painted that specific, unreachable, permanent stillness with more care and more patience and more obsessive precision than he brought to almost anything else in his entire life. Maybe he was painting grief. Maybe he was painting his answer to the question of what death actually is. Maybe he was doing what artists have always done with the things they cannot say out loud, putting them onto a surface, layer by layer, until they become something the world can stand in front of and feel without knowing why. 5 centuries of human beings have stood in front of that smile and felt something they could not name. Now you know what it is. I would love to know what you think. Does this change the way you see her smile? Does it make it more unsettling or somehow more human? Leave it in the comments. I read every single one. See you in the next video.